Hello, my name is Mari, and I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm taking this video because I really need people to know what happened with my pet. I had two guinea pigs, Professor Chubbs and Gandalf, and they were given into my care from by a good friend of mine 2 years ago. But I had helped adopt the original guinea pig. His name is Professor Chubbs. And I had seen him grown up from a little pig. And he was older. I'm not quite as sure, but he was about 7. And he was, there was never anything wrong with him. He was always super lively, super expressive, super weaky. He loved coming out of his cage and running around. And although at first he would kind of struggle, he would like being held and all that. But what happened was maybe about a week ago, I had noticed that he was a lot lighter than he was before. A lot lighter when I was picking him up to trim his nails. So a couple days later, maybe 2 days later, I took him into the vet on Friday. And they found out that his weight had actually gone down exactly half. He used to be 12 grams, and now he was 6. But they couldn't tell anything else. He was still eating his veggies, though I hadn't seen him eat hay or pellets or anything. And they wanted to take blood from him. And I didn't know if that was a good idea since he was so old and he was already feeling bad. But they were really good about it. They poked him twice with 2 needles in his front arm and then the other arm, because you can't really get much blood out of the front arms. They wanted to do the jugular, but I really didn't want them to do that. At this point, I could already tell he was not himself. He was moving slowly or slower, and he came up to my arm at one point when we were waiting, and he started licking it, and he doesn't usually do that. If he's really scared, he'll do that. And he didn't seem really scared, but he was licking my arm nonetheless. And so that for that day, they were going to do some tests to see if it was kidney issues or something else that they could tell from base comes. And they gave me some force feed to give him. So that night and the next day, I gave him the force feed, but he did not like it. He was not eating much of it. And then the next day, Saturday night, I was going to leave to go to Grand Rapids, which is about 2 hours away from here, for the 4th of July weekend, the one night. So before I left, I changed the cage, and I gave Chubbs his force feed, but the whole 24 hours before then, you could just tell he was napping a lot, or just not moving, the last 2 days. And you can tell he was feeling weaker. And, I had read that if you really help them with the force feed, they can get stronger. So I was hoping. And the last time after I cleaned his cage, while I was downstairs getting the soap detergent from the laundry bin, he had jumped back in his cage on his own, but he was just standing there, the place where he landed after he got into the cage, and he wasn't moving. He was just kind of staring in front of himself, and that was really weird. And Gandalf, the other pig, was kind of bothering him a little bit. He wasn't moving. And so finally, I started petting him. And he started slowly stretching out. And then he went into the corner and just kind of laid there. And I could tell he wasn't doing well. And despite that, I left him that night with no one in the apartment, with Gandalf in his cage, because they both live in that cage. And I knew it wasn't the best idea, considering his situation. But I left. And I had arranged for a friend of mine to check in on him the next morning to feed him, because I was going to come back the next night. And while we were driving there, I was worried that Gandalf might take advantage of the fact that he's weak right now and maybe, bully him, because they're both boys, and that's what they do. They always want to be the alpha. But anyway, I left him and we went there, and I had a good night. I just was not thinking about him. I was drinking lots of wine, having fun with friends, playing video games, dancing. And the next morning we wake up, and we were supposed to go to the beach. And me and two of my friends, we oversleep, because we were the ones that traveled there from Ann Arbor. We overslept. And we were going to go get breakfast before meeting everyone else at the beach. And stop at Meijer to get a swimsuit. And when I got to Meijer, my friend, I got a call to my phone, but I had recently lost my phone, so a lot of the numbers weren't in there anymore. So I got this call from a 908 number, I think. And I didn't know who it was, but it said on top, California. And I had a friend that I knew was from California, and that was the friend that I asked to come to feed my pigs. And I was like, I bet that's him. And then I knew something was wrong at that point. So I called him back, and he left a voicemail, but I didn't listen to it. I was like, hey, what's up? And he was like, Chubbs isn't doing very well. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, he's out of the cage, and he's lying by where the shoes are. And so at some point during the night or the morning, he jumped out of his cage, and he's like, yeah, he's just lying against the wall, and he's not moving. And I tried putting some food next to him, but he kind of reached for it, but then he just gave up and laid back again. And I was like, okay, well, I'm coming home now, so just please take the water bottle and see if he'll drink any water. And I asked him, can you please stay there until we get back there? Well, it'll be about 2 hours. He was like, okay. So I asked my friends, and they were like, yeah, we can just go home. So we got on the highway, and we drove back. And while I was driving back, I would message him periodically, and he was asking questions like, should I cool the apartment down? I don't know anything about guinea pigs. And I was like, well, no, unless he's hot, because I thought maybe he had an infection. He was running a really high fever, and that's why he was acting so run down. And guinea pigs usually like it on the warmer side. And I was like, well, is he really hot? And he was like, no, I don't think so. And so we kept driving. And I was just like, just please, stay by him and keep trying to offer him water or food. Just put it next to his mouth to see if he'll bite on. And I think about an hour ways, I checked in, I texted him again, and it was like, still not drinking any water? And I looked down on my screen, and I could see my friend typing. And then he stopped. And then maybe 30 seconds later, he's like, he stopped breathing. And I didn't know what to do, so I called him. And I asked him, so he's not responding at all? He's like, no. Not even if you touch him? It's like, no. So I hung up, and I kept driving. And before he called me, I looked up the hospital that was closest to me that would take exotic animals, because not all of them do. Not all of them would know what to do with chubs if they're just a cat and dog place. And I got this place in Novi that I was going to go to, but so an hour later when I got home, my friend was there waiting with me, and Chubbs was on the floor, just sprawled out, and he wasn't breathing. And one of his eyes was still half open, and he was already hard. And I didn't make it there, and I know that he died without me, but with my friend, who is practically a stranger. And I knew that he was really scared, and that he would have that he wouldn't want him to have died there without anyone around him that he knew or trusted. And I knew that I'd left him, knowing that he wasn't doing well, knowing that there was a risk that something might happen to him if I left. And that whole night he was alone, and if it was a human or a child, they could pick up a phone or they could text you and tell you, but I have no idea how he felt that whole night, or how he got out of his cage and ended up across the room against a wall. And I just really need people to know that that was the decision that I made with my guinea pig, my pet, that I, and only I, took full responsibility for. Despite knowing what I knew, that he was not doing well, that he was going downhill quickly, I left him with no one to look after him, and just someone to come in to feed them when it was convenient for them. It wasn't even like, make sure to be there at 10. They were like, well, after my appointment. And I was like, that's fine. So I just needed people to know that I did that. That that's the decision that I made, and something I have to live with for the rest of my life. And this is a long video, so you probably didn't watch the whole thing. But if you do choose to comment, and if you think that what I did was okay, there was no problem with it, there's no way I would have known, please, you're completely free to have that opinion, but please don't comment with it, because I don't believe what I did was okay. And hearing people tell me that is just not helping me at all. So, thank you.